make this rather snappy, won't you? I have some very heavy thinking to do before 10 o'clock.
Good evening, interwebs. Welcome into Greenie Sports Cards Live. My name is Jeremy Levine, your co-host for this evening's festivities, as we do every Tuesday, along with Steve Greenberg, the man himself, owner of Greenie Sports Cards. This is the world's first multi-stream broadcast for the hobby industry. We are coming to you across multiple platforms. That would be YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and a number of other points in between. And we appreciate you joining us, as many of you do every week. A programming note for tonight: we will not have a live auction due to the holiday weekend. We've got an extended weekend here, but Alex will be back on Thursday night on eBay, and you can join us again next Tuesday for our live auction over on Whatnot. So really pleased to be doing this since late January, when we began this foray into the hobby space with our live interviews and content and interesting cast of characters. And we've got a few more of those this evening. We got a chance to catch up with Carlo Civitella from the King of Collectibles of Golden Auctions. That show can be seen on Netflix. We had a chance to catch up, Steve and I, with Carlo over at the National Sports Collectors Convention. So we'll share that, a little bit of our conversation with Carlo. And then back at the Great Lakes Collectors Convention, Jim Dabbelt had an opportunity to catch up with head coach Ryan Gensler of the women's basketball team, head coach at the University of Akron. And some of that is really timely as we head into another collegiate year, with football kicking off this past weekend and basketball teams gearing up, and some really interesting tidbits that came out of that, both looking backwards at Caitlin Clark, for example, and looking forward with the MAC and University of Akron, and both Jim and Coach Gensler's take on the state of basketball in Ohio, both high school and at the collegiate level. So some interesting things to share there, and really looking forward to hearing what everybody has to say. At this point, we're going to go ahead and welcome in the man himself, Greenie, Steve Greenberg. Again, mentioned owner of Greenie Sports Cards, and Greenie, there's no shortage of things you've done and are continuing to do. You've got the live event space. You've got, of course, buying and selling every day, and this broadcast that we get to do every week, and it's evolving on the platforms. But you've also taken a step into the big high school football space here in Northeast Ohio. Let's talk a little bit about that first, with your involvement with ACP Productions. Tell people what this is, what Greenie Sports Cards is doing, and how you got involved.
So, Al Pulowski, who some of you may know is the pregame and postgame host on Bally's of the Cleveland Guardians, also does play-by-play for the Cleveland State Vikings, the basketball team. on the radio as well as the ESPN3. But he also does high school football. And Ed Doherty, who also does the women's games on ESPN3 and also does some other things, they team up on 1420 WHK, and they have the high school football game of the week. And we were proud to be a corporate sponsor of this game of the week, and just dipping into the local high school football, which in Ohio, I mean, it's about as popular as you can get for Friday night lights here in Northeast Ohio. And the Cleveland, Canton, Massillons, and the Ignatius and the Eds, and the high schools that we went to. I mean, there's just so many powerhouses in Northeast Ohio, and just being able to support these the high school athletes and the radio, because as you and I have both said, radio has been a big part of our lives, with our families, and supporting things on the radio makes sense. And radio works, and hundreds of years proves that. So and then sports, obviously, and football is something that we love to do. So being able to team up with these guys and being on the radio and sponsor these games was really quite an easy decision.
Very cool. Yeah, radio works. I selfishly, it definitely works, but it's still the number one reach medium in the United States. Radio and audio. Audio is radio. Radio is audio, as we talk all the time. It reaches more Americans than any other medium. So really interesting play there for Greenie Sports Stars to get involved. As you said, high school football is huge here. Side note, I had an opportunity I was up in Chicago over this past weekend. I had a chance to go to a high school football game in Lake Zurich, and that the Chicago land is really impressive as well for high school football. The Friday night lights, their experience there was pretty incredible, and the students get into it, and the schools are pretty big, and the quality of football is excellent. So that's what's going on there. But not only on radio, Greenie, you also actually got involved on
the streaming.
On the stream as well. So talk about the CVC TV connection.
Yeah,
here.
so the Chagrin Valley Conference, which quite frankly is ever changing. When I was in high school, the Solon Comets, we were in the Chagrin Valley Conference, and but a guy that I grew up with, Pete Tellup, he has this production company, and we've had them out to the Great Lakes Collectors Convention, doing some of their podcasts, The Voice of the Land, and some of the other things that they do. And I know that he has this streaming production, and they broadcast a high school football game of the week on their YouTube channel, the CVC TV. And to then team up with them and be on their channel was also a very easy decision, just to be able to support people that we know and support us. And it just, mutual decisions like that are very easy to make.
Yeah, and here all of a sudden you're at the center point of high school football in Northeast Ohio, both on the radio and on the stream. So very cool stuff. What's coming up this week? We've got Kirtland and Perry. Looks like on this game here.
Yeah, I don't know. What are we in? Yeah,
9-6,
we're in September
Kirtland,
already.
Perry.
Can you believe that? September. So yeah, so Kirtland is playing.
Yeah.
We will be in Kirtland on September 21st, coincidentally, for the Kirtland Card Show. This Saturday, September the 7th, though, we will be in Broadview Heights at the Woodside Event Center. So, to move on from what's going on this week in high school football, there's also card shows, because that's what we do on the weekends.
And you've got
what's
real
going
quick
on?
the Tar Blooders of Glenville
Yeah.
against the Eagles of Avon over on 1420 AM.
Avon gave Ignatius a loss in the first game of the season. So there we have it already with high school football, and St. Ignatius being a local powerhouse, and Avon is as well. And that game was played at Cleveland Brown Stadium, if you saw that the first week.
Yeah, that was the 23rd. I see Avon against St. Ignatius. So
And it's no longer Cleveland Browns Stadium, Jeremy.
no, it is not. That it is somewhat breaking news. It is now
Mhm.
Huntington Bank Field, which the Cleveland Browns announced today, of course, that there's a 20-year naming rights deal for the field itself. And as Daryl Ryder shared, who we were able to talk to a couple weeks ago, those naming rights will extend beyond wherever this ends up. If the decision to keep the stadium on the lake remains, they as in Huntington Bank will be the field sponsor, stadium sponsor. And if the new field gets built in Brook Park or anywhere else, Huntington will come along for the ride. So you can take that to the bank.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. And real quick, we should be remiss to say, Jim Donovan had been a part of our lives for the last 20 some years on the radio, and unfortunately, he's had to step down on the radio side for the Cleveland Browns, and we just being able to listen to him for the last 25 years has been terrific. So we just be remiss if we didn't mention Jim Donovan.
Absolutely. Thinking about Jimmy, and you mentioned in a post just how fortunate we've been as sports fans throughout our entire lives and even beyond. The quality of play-by-play hosts and broadcasters in this town is just remarkable. From Joe Tate with the Cavaliers and Tom Hamilton with Herb Score preceding him, and then Jim followed a long line of people you know very well, your family knows very well, from Gib Shanley and Nev Chandler and
Even
yeah,
the analysts is Doug Deacon, right, and Jim Mueller, and your dad called games at Cleveland State for how many years, right? The Sweet
22
16
years. Yeah,
games. Yeah, so yeah, play by play and radio, like we said earlier, has been around our families for as long as we've been around.
that's for sure. So yeah, really excited that I'm not excited about the weather change, but it really excited that college football kicked off this past weekend. We're talking about college basketball as that season and practice gets underway. It's a really good time to be a sports fan. You've got baseball coming down the home stretch, and the NFL kicking off, college football kicking off. This is good
Fun
stuff.
time. Fall is a great time, and you mentioned that some of the people that we're going to have on tonight's Carlo from Golden Auction, and so Golden Auction they had a big one end last night. I had 3 items myself, 3 cards that did pretty well. And Kenny Rhoda, who we had on last week, his jersey did, or it's not his jersey, his Michael Jordan autographs. The scorecard in the Hoops magazine from that 69-point game ended last night. So this is a perfect segue to reminisce with Carlo from back at the National when we got a chance to catch up and talk a little bit with him.
Hey, this is Greenie Sports Cards. We're at the National Sports Collectors Convention with Carlo off the heels of the King of Collectibles.
Let's go.
Yeah, that show is awesome. We watched it front to back the first 2 seasons. What have we got here in Cleveland that's going to rival something on the show?
I mean, so, number one, thank you for watching the show.
Yeah.
We're fortunate enough, top 10 in many countries, including the U.S., peaked at number 4. So, on display here, we have a lot of our items from our Golden 100 auction, some of the best here. And we got a lot of big items, and it's just been great. The show's been great here in Cleveland. It's been a great host city, and, dude, the booth's been rocking.
It has. We've seen it. I know we've had a history. I've given you some 90s inserts.
Yeah, dude, listen, Steve's got a great collection over here, man.
And we have some more.
Awesome.
Has there been anything cool like that's been submitted this year?
Yeah, I mean, look, we've taken in, a lot of PMGs, and we've taken in Bowman first. I mean, dude, honestly, everything. So it's been a really good show, and it's a great time to sell Golden right now. So it's exciting.
It is.
Carl, this is an amazing display. Collections on sale. It's the universe of buying and selling here in Cleveland, Ohio. When Golden comes to a show, you guys have an unbelievable display here as well. What defines a successful show? When you guys go home, what are you looking to accomplish when you're here?
I mean, it's twofold. Obviously, it's great meeting our consigners, and it's great meeting people that love the show. It's very humbling to meet everyone and the fans and all. And I personally love meeting the consigners. You know, at the same time, we love to get consignment as well. I mean, the show, how expensive are these shows getting? It's crazy. So, getting out there in the hobby and seeing people and seeing everyone's passion and bringing in consignment, obviously.
Do you have any items or item in your collection that would not be for sale, that you can't put a price on?
So for me, I'm a nostalgia collector, man. I started collecting in kind of the early 90s, which was the junk wax era. But, dude, I got some early 90s Jordan stuff, Team Leader, Total D All-Star, PSA 10. Got the Iris and Topps Chrome Refractor. I mean, those are my personal cards that, but those cards kind of brought me to where I am today here at Golden. So for me, it's just, I'm never going to let go of them.
Yeah, that was cool to catch up with him. I had actually sent him a message to see if he was able to come on tonight, but actually he was in Germany this weekend at a convention there and wasn't sure what time he was going to get home. So we will get him on a live show at some point. But yeah, that was fun catching up with Golden, and we do have a history. I give them some things to auction every time I get a chance, and I have not had any complaints with them.
Yeah, and the ripples from the National Sports Collectors Convention continue to spread out. That it was last month already, but we're still able to catch up with a number of people that we were able to talk to there. And as you mentioned earlier, Kenny Rhoda had an auction that just concluded last night, and Golden has, as far as I know, has done right by you, done right by anybody else who consigns with them. So we appreciate Carlo taking some time, and we look forward to talking to him when he gets his bearings back in the U.S.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, that was great. And now, like you said, looking forward to fall sports and winter sports. Maybe not the winter weather, but definitely the fall, right? So football, and then leading into basketball. And this was actually a really good conversation. And not to get forward to next year's Great Lakes Collectors Convention, but we do have a stage and we do have seats up there, and I know that we have talked about making that a little bit more of an actual theater where people can actually like interact and do some things or listen to some live podcasts. So I know there were people watching this one here, and Coach Gensler, we've had a chance to get to know him a little bit, and their team. He is doing some good things in Akron and building a nice culture. They have some good players coming back, and Lene Riley, who can really shoot the ball. So I look forward to watching the Zips play this year.
As do I, along with Cleveland State and Kent State and all of our local teams. We keep saying it, can't say it enough. The women's basketball game has just come an unbelievable long way. It's an incredible product. It's basketball in its purest. And if you like watching great shooters and hard defense and great passing, good team play, that's the game right there.
That's right. And these girls they're going to play some big games, and they're going to play against, Cleveland State played against Caitlin Clark last year, and they're going to play Ohio State this year. And, Akron has some big games on their schedule. And off the top of my head, I can't remember, but I know they beat a Power 5 school last year, didn't they, with Reagan? So there's a lot of good basketball here in Northeast Ohio.
And on the back side of this interview, we'll catch up and talk about a few really interesting nuggets that took place. Before we jump into that, you mentioned earlier about some other events coming up. So talk about, you've got Kirtland coming up and then a big one at the end of the month.
Yeah. Well, first, this Saturday is the Broadview Heights show. So we have close to 100 tables, September the 7th at the Woodside Events Center at St. Michael's in Broadview Heights. So we look forward to that one. That one always brings a lot of people. We do that 4 times a year. So this Saturday, September the 7th. Then September 21st, we're going to be at Kirtland, the Senior Center, and that's our monthly show. It is great on the east side of Cleveland. It's a nice family-friendly show. A lot of cards, high-end cards to low-end boxes to dig through. Pokemon will be there, so that's a great little show. And then one of our new signature shows, which we did in May with Operation Fandom, who has several stores in Medina, Worcester area. We're teaming up with them to do the Medina County Collectors Fair. So that will be September 27th through the 29th. Friday night will be a little preview trade night, and then the show will be all day Saturday and Sunday. And that's a mixture of everything. And we have some music memorabilia that's going to be there, and Beatles records and some art cards, and then the Pokemon and the Funkos. And I think we have a train guy coming, and on top of obviously the sports cards. So that is going to be a little bit of mixture of everything. So we can't wait for that show at the Medina County Fairgrounds, September 27th through the 29th. And everything is on our website, greeniesportscards.com. So check that out, and perfect. That's right up there, and we'll actually put it in the comments as well.
Yeah, that show was so much fun back in April. Talked about that before too. You've got the sports cards world and helmets and cards and action figures and all kinds of stuff. And then all of a sudden you got cosplay and costume characters walking around and anime
So
and pop.
the
Yeah.
cosplay will be back on Sunday, and we do have a guest lineup. We're probably another day or two from announcing that, but it's going to be pretty exciting, pretty scary, maybe, I guess, if I could tease that a little bit. But there will be a lineup of some autograph guests that you just don't get a chance to see every day. So we look forward to rolling that out for everybody to hear.
Yeah, from what I hear, it's pretty timely. It's could be a little frightening, scary, as you said. Yeah, and stay tuned. So some very interesting,
Yeah.
high profile names that'll be heading towards Medina at the end of the month. And again, those
Yeah.
dates, the fall edition of that, September 27th and 29th, as you said, that Friday the 27th is the trade night, and then Saturday and Sunday are the full event days.
Yep. Can't wait for that.
All right. Well, we will harken back to the other big show, the Great Lakes Collectors Convention, where Jim Dabbelt had a chance to speak with head coach Ryan Gensler. Jim, of course, has over 35 years of experience here throughout Ohio. He's really the foremost expert in high school sports, particularly girls and women's basketball. He's a real respected name throughout the state, with the coaches, with the players, athletic directors, and he had a chance to get some really interesting stuff out of Coach Gensler, who had just spent his first season as head coach of the Akron Zips women's basketball team after a number of years as an assistant coach. And we're going to go ahead and run that interview and then talk about it on the other side.
Fieldhouse. Jim Dabbelt here at the Great Lakes Collectors Convention. Thank you very much for joining us for some women's basketball talk. Big weekend here in Cleveland with the NCAA Final Four. up at the Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, I believe, in Cleveland. Ryan Gensler, the head coach of Akron women's basketball, with me today. Ryan, thanks for coming out today.
Absolute pleasure, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. We're just going to talk about a few things. We're going to start with kind of talk about your season this year. You guys, in the MAC, as for those of you who have not seen Akron this year, tell a little bit about your program.
Yeah, I got the job about a year ago, last week, actually. I was at University of Dayton for 5 years, University of Illinois for a season, and that paved the way to come to University of Akron. And when I got here, the landscape of college basketball has kind of changed, and there's a transfer portal, and there were several players in it. I needed to bring in 9 when I got the job, and I was able to bring in 6 new players, and then they had signed 3. So from the get-go, we had some work to do in establishing a good culture, establishing how we want to play basketball, and thought we accomplished that on a couple different levels. And we kicked off the year. We went down to Daytona, Florida, and we played in a neutral site game against Pittsburgh out of the ACC, and actually knocked them off in overtime. And that was the first win over a Power 5 school since 2008 for University of Akron, and actually the first time that they had beaten a Power 5 school on the road since '98. So started to put together a semblance of what we're doing is working. And MAC play was a grind. Unfortunately, it didn't go exactly how we had hoped. There were great teams in our conference this year, spearheaded by Kent State, that ended up going to the NCAA tournament. Toledo and Ball State also had really strong seasons, but wrapped it up a few weeks back with a win up at Central Michigan, and now attacking the offseason, kind of the same way to bring in more players of how we want to be able to play. And very similar. Do you remember our Dayton teams when Shauna Green was there? Defend, rebound, run. Get out and playing a lot of ball screens, those kind of things. So good year one.
Talk about the MAC a little bit. Everybody sees what's on television with the Big Ten, the SEC, but and the MAC has a lot of great stuff on ESPN Plus. A lot of their games are on that we can watch from home. Just talk about the style of play, and just talk about actually the MAC in general. What draws recruits into the MAC?
I think the conference landscape sets up really well for folks that want to play semi-close to home, right? And it's a good level of basketball. MAC women's basketball has been exceptionally strong in the past 10 years. We've sent multiple teams from the league to the NCAA tournament. The years that we've done that, there's been a couple teams that have gone all the way to the Sweet 16. So I think even when they get there, they're on a national stage and able to compete nationally. And I think that's a big draw. And I think there's a reason that the Final Four is in Cleveland and not somewhere else. It's traditionally in Tampa, Nashville, these warm traditional places, right? But believe it or not, the Final Four will have been in the state of Ohio 3 times in 11 years, which is pretty incredible. So there's an appetite for women's basketball in the state of Ohio, and that's really the crux of the MAC landscape, with their conference office being up in Cleveland, having several teams in the state of Ohio and neighboring states. It sets up really well for good basketball with good programs, for kids to not have to go too far to find that level of success, and great schools that offer a variety of different programs. So the MACtion's real, and comparatively to the other leagues, it stacks up greatly.
We'll talk about the Final Four here in just a minute, but you mentioned something early on, something that has changed the entire landscape of recruiting, and that's a transfer portal. Some people love it, some people hate it. I think the difference is 10, 15 years ago, you knew exactly how many kids you had to bring in. We have 3 seniors, you have to replace 3 kids.
Right.
Now you may have to replace 10 kids.
Yeah.
And it happens very regularly. Talk about the transfer portal and the difference it's made in the game.
It's a pro model now with no pro guardrails of that. And I think that's the scary thing, but also the exciting thing. You talk about me getting the job last year and being able to craft a team in my image and likeness happens a lot sooner now than I would have been afforded otherwise. Would have had to graduate those freshmen, sophomore, juniors, seniors, and then in year 4 you finally have your kids in as seniors. But this does afford you the opportunity to craft that image and likeness a lot sooner. But I think the results need to happen a lot sooner. And you've seen it. I mean, how many times do kids change AAU programs now? I mean, it's
Every year.
Every year.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you probably have a running list of local kids in Ohio that change, in really good AAU programs, or they've had really good roles in that. And that's been going on for a number of years, right? I mean, for at least the last 5-6 years, I mean, kids that stayed with the homegrown teams don't necessarily stay with the homegrown teams, and then shoe companies come in and offer them a little bit more, and so the ecosystem continues. And I think that's where we're at in the college level now as well. It's been a habit.
Does it make it difficult because you really don't know how many kids you're going to have to replace, because you have kids that go in the transfer portal in April of
Right.
this year,
Right.
and then you're like, now we got to replace another one, and we got to replace another one in May. Does it make it more difficult, or there are so many kids in the portal that you're going to find somebody?
Yep.
But does it make it difficult timing-wise when you don't find out till April, May sometimes?
Sure.
Hey, I'm leaving.
Sure, absolutely. And they put windows on it now, and there's about a 40-day window, but it's scary because we've got 26 days left in the window, and within 26 days a kid can have a bad workout in the spring and say, forget this, I'm out of here, and you're left having to fill that in. But I think besides the window, it does make it challenging because you have to look at players just simply as players, and you can't necessarily peel back the onion and say, well, what's your academic plan? And and I think those are the things that no one talks about, is when you're a junior in college, you can't all of a sudden transfer as a senior and expect all those credits to transfer over. Otherwise, everyone would graduate from Harvard and spend 1 year there or 2 semesters there, right?
Yeah.
So there's got to be, there's academic residency requirements and things like that. And I think we're in such a microwave society that those things get lost, or the advice to those players gets lost. And now they're on the back end of things scrambling and saying, I've got to figure out this academic plan, or now they're in more of a general studies thing than they were before. And that academic component is getting lost in it. And it's troubling in a lot of ways, because you want to be able to come in, and sure, kids can change their major, but now you're losing credits and you're losing these, and it's unsettling.
Caitlin Clark, a young lady who has broken every record known to man.
Yeah.
And the thought of her getting back to the Final Four is what fans wanted to see.
Yeah.
People want to see that matchup, but a lot of people want to see Caitlin Clark, and you've, I'm sure, seen her a million times. Obviously, she can score. She can pass the basketball, which is something a lot of people overlook. Some people early in the season said all she does is shoot the ball, but then she leads the country in assists per game. Talk about Caitlin's game and talk about Iowa tonight.
So, Jim, as you know, our staff at University of Dayton went to Illinois last year. Yep. And so we were fortunate enough to play her. We played her on New Year's Day last year, and we beat them. We beat them at home. So seeing her up close and sitting in that assistant coach's chair, watching her is scary as hell. Because, you're telling your kids to pick her up at half court, and that dynamic's real, and everything that you mentioned is real. I think where she's taking a big step is in her leadership. And she, it's well documented how chippy the game gets, and the fouls, and some of those things with her. And that's where she's taken a big jump from last year to this year, and especially at this time. She seems very poised right now in how she's talking. She seems relaxed. I think she's over some of the, chasing the record. And I think all of those lessons lead her to, you're finally here, and now you can just play ball. Because she played ball last game against LSU on Monday night, and that was pretty spectacular. Like, there was no nerve. I'm sure there was, but she didn't show it. And I think with her, the passing ability has been fantastic. Kate Martin on their team has done an insane job. She's playing the guard spot and running the floor so well, and her assists are just her beating folks down the court. And those are the ones, as a coach on the other side, you're saying, guys, like, she ain't anything special. It's not like she's a track athlete. She's just getting out ahead of you, and you're losing sight of what it is. But as teams come up and play Clark's closer to half court, you're going to have some advantages, behind. So I would expect her to get going. I'd expect her to get going downhill a little bit. I think the three-point shot is going to be something that everyone IDs and recognizes, but she doesn't get going with that until she's seen it go through a couple times. She needs to get to the free throw line. She needs to get a floater. She needs to get something going at the basket. She needs something positive going early. And then the stuff at half court and, those logo shots, when people start getting to their feet, start arising.
A kid that is often overlooked on that team. I mean, those of us who watch the game know the game. Who I'm probably good to say is Gabby Marshall. Gabby Marshall's a kid that nobody writes about, nobody talks about. All she does is shut teams down, shut players down, and she's one of the most hidden gems in college basketball.
She absolutely was, and was a hidden gem coming out of high school as well. I want to say that she only had a couple Power 5 offers.
Correct.
And we had offered her at Dayton. We lived in that Mount Notre Dame gym down in Cincinnati, and we kept saying, this kid's a winner. Like her and Makaira Cook, who played at Dayton and went to Illinois and just won the WBIT on Monday night as well, on Wednesday night. They won multiple championships at Mount Notre Dame, which was a storied program, but Gabby was a big part of that. And she has developed into more than just a three-point shooter. And I think the biggest knock on Gabby coming out of high school was, well, can she defend at that level? She's a smaller kid. She's slight in nature. She's their best defender. Yeah. I mean, that's a true credit to the work ethic and the blue-collarness that she brought to, University of Iowa. And she is. You're going to see her take multiple charges tonight. You're going to see her, hounding their best player. I mean, she might be matched up with Paige on the get-go, and that'll be a really fun matchup because guess what? Gabby's had to guard Clark in practice. Yeah. It doesn't every day. It doesn't phase her. No. So it's really cool. There's a great Ohio impact with Gabby Marshall being from Cincinnati, Bree Hall being from the Dayton area, who's playing really well at South Carolina. Like it's got a good vibe to it tonight with some good Ohio thumbprints.
You mentioned Illinois in the WNIT championship.
Yep.
That's where you were at before Akron.
Yep.
Just briefly talk about what they did this year, because you know all of those people. So talk about what Shauna and them did this year.
It was unbelievable. I think, Shauna's always been very calculated in how she does things and very consistent in how she does things. And, it's those pieces that I'm trying to bring to Akron. And we're getting there. And so in year one, you're trying to just put together a team. And she had some familiarity, had a couple kids from Dayton come with her, and Makaira Cook, being an all Big Ten kid, went and really, I think in a lot of ways, overachieved in year one of getting to the NCAA tournament for a team that hadn't gone in over 20 years. And so when you go into year two, there's a lot of expectations, and they'll always tell you year two is oftentimes harder. The kids have heard your fastball. They've seen your curveball. You've got to still rejuvenate those kids. And they had a couple, injuries early in December. Makaira was hurt for a little while, and they were in some really close games, and she allowed close games to be blisters for them that calloused. And I really believe that it was those experiences throughout the year and the similar messages that she was preaching that allowed them to go on a 5-game win streak. And credit to them, because they beat some really good teams in that WBIT, and it was an inaugural WBIT. It was the first time that the NCAA sponsored a secondary tournament. So there was a WNIT as a tertiary option this year, but that was the best 32 teams that got left out of the NCAA tournament. So there wasn't any automatic bids. Like they selected those, and they went in there and ran through everyone. I mean, and beat great teams along the way, and really all those bubble teams as well.
Just a few questions to wrap this up is let's talk a little about, this is, how many years have you been coaching now?
Coming up on 12.
12 years, and this is my 40th, so I've been around for a long time, since long before the internet. You
were the staple in everything. Back when I first started coaching at University of St. Bonaventure, like coming into Ohio, like I remember checking my phone one day, and like our text history was going back to kids that were playing for John Coffey, like down to the Dayton Lady Hoop Stars. And I mean, you had the pulse of everything greater Dayton related. And then as you expanded your reach into the state of Ohio and things changed, and the Tom Jenkins of the world passes the baton to different folks. Yes. And it was really kind of cool that I was like, all right, like there's real good basketball in Ohio.
There's a ton of great players.
Yeah.
It's the top 3 in America in recruited kids. Mm-hmm. So obviously, and that's not going to change. The young kids are coming up. It's pretty good. But as far as the state of the game, let's talk about how it's changed both positively and negatively that you have seen in the last, since you started getting involved.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of positives, and I think the negatives you've got to kind of spin to a glass half full, right? And so I'll start with the positives. The positives are the coverage, like you mentioned, a lot of like the MAC being on ESPN Plus. So, you know, my parents that live in Ocala, Florida, can watch the games easy. They don't have to go online. They don't got to pay. You know,
that helps with recruits too.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, you can recruit a kid in Hawaii and say, hey, check it out on ESPN Plus, and you know, as long as they're in the same time zone, they're in good shape. Or they can go back and watch the replay, which is also kind of cool. And there's broadcasters for those games. I mean, they're really high level, you know, productions of what they do. So the coverage has gotten better. And I think as you've seen ESPN, who's got the rights for college basketball for the Final Four and whatnot, they've shifted through, you know, they've seen women's soccer take off with the World Cup. They've seen, you know, the WNBA take off. They've shifted their focus in how they promote it and what they put on, you know, the worldwide leader on SportsCenter. So now some of those big games that were on ESPN2 once a week are now on Thursday nights in prime time, on Saturday afternoons, on Sunday afternoons, you know, on national television in those slots. And the really cool thing is the players generally are staying at their schools. You know, Clark's been there for a while. Like, there are household names now that fans, you know, young women, young boys, my son knows who Caitlin Clark is. He wants to watch the games now. Like, it doesn't matter if it's guys, girls, like he just wants to watch good sports, and he wants to latch on to people that he recognizes. So the staying power of some of these young women in sports has been fantastic for them to have a brand. And
women's basketball right now, Ryan, is at an all-time high.
Yeah.
That it's ever been. You had 12 million people watching the LSU-Iowa game the other day, which I saw a graphic that said it was more than any MLB game, you know, almost any NBA game, all the NHL games. It's just amazing, and you've seen it.
Yeah.
The growth of women's sports in America is just skyrocketing.
Yeah. We stayed up after that game to watch the Southern Cal game, and my wife, we're laying in bed, and she's got it on the TV, and she says, man, that number 12 for Southern Cal, she's smooth. I said, Juju Watkins? Yeah. And she goes, oh, that's who that is? And it was the first time she had seen it.
People know the names.
Right.
They're starting to know the names.
And that's a freshman.
Yeah.
So now there's going to be another wave when Clark leaves. You know, Beckers comes back. You know, Watkins. You've got Van Lith in the portal again. You know, there's my father-in-law texted me this morning. He goes, hey, where's HVL going? You know, I was like, Haley Van Lith? And he's like, yeah, where's she going? I was like, I don't, you know. But like for the regular sports fan or the regular folk to take an interest on it now is just incredible. And it's a tribute to the product, because the product's good. I mean, Monday night's game, LSU and Iowa was incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, Clark's making threes, Reese is making plays. You know, like, it was great basketball.
Incredible, Walt.
You know, and the downsides are, you know, sometimes when the adults get in the room, they ruin things. So,
They
you know,
do.
Whether it's parents, whether it's a little bit of the name, image, and likeness money, and there's a good benefit to that, but there are some that, you know, go outside those lines and, you know, make it about those things instead of, you know, the things that matter. So that'll always be a part of anything that you do. But I think for the most part, they're significantly more positive than there are negative to this point.
So obviously the transition coming in from a freshman or from a senior in high school to a freshman in college. There's a lot of different things that take place, a lot of different things that kids have to deal with. Talk about the transition process, if anybody out here has any high school athletes, when they go into college.
I think the biggest one is time management. I mean, your days are so regimented from when you wake up
and we'll talk about that too.
Yeah, the school demands. And then I think the other part is it's just a different physical game. I mean, I always equate it to this. When you're a freshman in high school and you play varsity, you know, you're playing against 18-year-old girls, right? And they're just physically more mature, you know, stronger, bigger, stronger. Now when you come into college, you're an 18-year-old sometimes playing against 23, 24-year-olds. I mean, that's just a significant difference of size and ability, and you know, so to be able to make that transition, you've got to be in great shape, you got to get stronger, And you've got to have the mental stability to continue down that path, to work on those things, and knowing that your best days are still ahead of you.
You know, we see a lot of times especially in AAU and high school, an issue with some parents and how they kind of act at games and how they treat officials and treat coaches and treat their own kids.
Yeah.
Talk about how that's different at the collegiate level, and any advice for kids that are watching this that have to deal with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think the apple doesn't fall far from the tree is something that, is an analogy that goes way back that we always look at. And I think that's a good indication of when things get hard, what happens. And it still happens in college where parents want, input or have, stronger opinions about, different things. But I think in anything, you've got to be an elite communicator, and you got to be an elite communicator with the players. And you got to also understand that they've got more pressure on them than they've ever had before. We're in a Twitter, Instagram era where good games get thrown up there and MVPs and notorieties, and it's a constant, keep up with those things. So for the first time in their life, when they don't start a game, when they've been a 4-year starter in high school or a 3-year starter in high school and now have to come in off the bench, or things that they were used to having their way with, now when they're playing other Division I players and they start to not go their way, you've got to at least have a realistic conversation with them so that they know parents are going to parent. They're in charge and responsible, and their love is for that one player. And as coaches, you have a responsibility to the whole team. And I think if you can help them understand that, it eases it. But you also got to provide some resources for them. As much as I can coach, I'm not a counselor. I got my degree in counseling, but there are resources on these campuses now that players need to tap into a lot more. And it is not taboo for them to go see a psychologist, counselor, counseling center. 14 out of 14 kids on my team will have seen the team psychologist throughout the year, and that's very much encouraged. And I think that's the element of how they need to process, deal, and relieve their stresses and anxieties, because they're getting it from all angles.
We talked about AAU as well, real quick. You go to the big events, you go to the Clash, you go to the Run for the Roses, and for those of you who don't know, those are the big events nationally. As a D1 college coach, you don't care how many points someone scores. You don't sit there with a scorebook.
No.
What do you look for?
The first thing is do they go hard all the time? I mean, I think it's real easy to sit there at those courts, and Jim, you've been there hundreds of courts, right? And you walk by one, it's easy to identify who scores the points, right? Or how they can score, and everyone's got their own philosophy offensively, defensively, those kind of things, and they've got to match that. But for me, it's how hard they go all the time, or how hard do they go after a rebound? How do they react to a tough play? There's a lot of cliches of how they interact with their teammates and how they are with things, but you need to see some level of failure in those settings, and you need to see how they respond to it, because they're going to hit failure in college, and that's going to be a great predictor. Now, I don't discount anyone if they don't handle it great, but it's something that we'll certainly bring up when we follow up and ask and see. And it's funny, I was listening to a podcast on the way up here. It was Julian Edelman's Games with Names. He had the great Ernie Adams, who worked with Belichick, and Edelman asked him, he said, "Hey, Ernie, what's one of your pre-NFL draft questions that you ask at the Combine?" And he says, "What's your greatest football accomplishment?" And he says, if he goes to a singular moment of, "Oh, I broke a record," or he's a me guy, and he actually said, the greatest answer that he got was totally unpredictable. He had Joe Burrow in the room. He asked Joe that question, and Joe said his greatest football achievement was getting a defensive stop on the goal line in a state championship game or a playoff game en route to states, because Joe played linebacker. And Ernie was blown away. He said, "This is a football guy." So it's you certainly see the basketball things at these events. You want to see the toughness piece, but you got to have the follow-up of asking some of these gritty type questions to understand what they're about, or how their future success is going to actually look like.
We're going to wrap things up with this question. and anybody who has high school athletes would probably appreciate to know this, but in a typical day of a D1 athlete, typical day of one of your women's basketball players at Akron, including a class day, just a regular full day, go through a typical day for an athlete.
Yeah, in season, it's a grind. And even out of season, it is. Our kids were up at 6 a.m. today, getting a lift in and getting their strength and conditioning in, and then they've got classes for the rest of the day. But in season, you're going to, depending on what time you have practice, you're going to have 2 or 3 classes. You got to figure out a time to go and eat to make sure that you're fueling yourself for the practice later that afternoon. And the practice block is about 3 hours. You're going to lift for about 45 minutes. You're going to have about 20, 25 minutes of film before practice. And then you're going to have practice for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. You're going to hit some sort of level of study table after that. And then you got to do your homework. And then you rinse and repeat. And again, try to find some time to fit some meals in there to make sure that you're fueling your body the right way. And the next day you do it. And then next day you travel to a game, and sometimes you get back at 2, 3 a.m. and got to go to class at 8 a.m. the next day and do it all over again.
So Ron Gensler from Akron University, women's basketball coach with the Zips. Congratulations on all you guys have done so far.
Thank you, Jim.
Looking forward to watching you guys continue to grow the program with you over there. And I'm Jim Dabbelt with the Dabbelt Report. Thank you very much for your time, and best of luck next season.
Thanks, Jim. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Lots of incredible stuff in there in a short 25-minute run.
It is. And you can just understand, and by listening to Coach Gensler, know why he got this job at Akron. That's a guy that knows the history of the game. He studies it, he follows it, and the culture that he's building at Akron is much like what's needed here in the smaller schools, the non-Power 5 schools. And we've seen it at Cleveland State. We're seeing it at Kent State. You have to build a culture with these student athletes, so that they're not going to go transfer, right? Or at least build a nice culture that incoming students want to come and they see how they're being prepared to further their careers, whether they do transfer or go to the next level.
That's right. It's a story of 2 schools right now, and we've been fortunate to spend time with both Coach Gensler and Coach Kilsmeyer over at Cleveland State. CSU had 1 transfer in the portal and lost a single player, and that was a player going back home, which was an understandable transfer. On the other hand, Akron, I think he had 5 or 6 that peeled out of there, including Reagan Bass, who led the team in a number of statistical categories. So he's got his work cut out for him, but he, like you said, he's building the program the right way.
He is, and to hear what he looks for when he goes to these camps and these all-star events, you're right. Anybody can see how somebody can score and who the best scorer is, but it's how you react to different things. And you like hearing a coach say that, and that's the type of program that he wants to build, is the hardworking kids.
We were reminded of a couple things in there that the NCAA Final Four has been in the state of Ohio 3 times in the last 17 years. In 2007, it was in, I believe it was then Gund Arena in Cleveland. Then in 2018, it was down in Columbus. And this past year in 2024, back up at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. So Ohio's a hotbed. He mentioned a couple players. We got to spend time with Maddie Westbeld a little bit earlier this year out of Kettering. So down in Southern Ohio, there's some real competitive basketball players or competition going on. The other interesting
and Notre Dame also has KK Bransford.
And KK Bransford over at Notre Dame. Jim mentioned this, and of course our thanks to Jim Dabbelt from the Dabbelt Report for spending that time at the Great Lakes Collectors Convention along with Coach Gensler. And he referenced the semifinal of the NCAA this year attracted 12 million viewers. The final ended up with just shy of 19 million, 18.9 million viewers tuned in to watch that game, South Carolina against Iowa and Caitlin Clark. the residual effects
More
of that are
people-
going to be really significant. And Coach Gensler mentioned all the primetime games that are taking place, the availability of women's basketball on ESPN Plus and around the dial. You're talking about a generation now that is seeing these women compete and at the highest level and
Right.
at the highest profile of sports. I don't see that slowing down anytime soon.
No, I mean, you mentioned how many people watched that women's final. That's more than watched the men's final, right? And
That's right.
I mean, we're seeing it now with in the WNBA and how many people are watching the games. And yes, they're watching Caitlin Clark, they're watching Angel Reese, but they're watching the other games too. And the ratings prove that. You know, it's not just me saying, "Oh, well, people are watching these games." That the ratings prove that people are tuning in and watching. And ESPN and the Ion Network and the NBA TV and people are broadcasting these games because the viewers want to see it. You know, yeah, sure. Caitlin Clark is and Angel Reese. They're the two most popular rookies this year, and people are tuning into their games. And but there's a lot of good basketball.
A lot of good basketball. We're not the first to say this. It was referenced earlier along the way, but there was an impact of Magic Johnson and Larry Bird when they met in the finals and then carried that on to the NBA, which was a fledgling league at that point and on the point of collapse, as we recall. And these two guys came in and competed and brought it to a whole other level. And eventually you got a Michael Jordan that took it to heights previously unseen. And we recognize the NBA today as a different game as it was 30, 40 years ago. This has the same foundations where you've got an Angel Reese and a Caitlin Clark going at it. And now they're in the league and just raising the profile and shining a light on the game. It's going to have a significant impact for years to come.
Right. And even the girls that are still in college that are, I mean, it's not household names, right? Because we say it because we follow it, but there are big names that people are going to learn. Hannah Hidalgo, right? And Paige and Kiki Rice and Juju Watkins. And I mean, there's some good basketball players, you know, and, you know, we saw a little story, or I saw a Kyle Rossi post, you know, maybe Destiny Leo, right? I mean, you never know in these leagues, right? So
Yeah,
if you can play, they're going to find you.
They're going to find you, and CSU has some players, so we'll definitely learn more and talk more about that as the season progresses. They have the reigning Horizon League Player of the Year in Colby Maples. They have the Newcomer of the Year in Mickey Purdue coming back, and they have 2 years ago the Horizon League Player of the Year in Destiny Leo, who they lost a handful of games into the season last year. Those three have never really played together, or not played all that much in game competition. So Coach Kilsmeyer is going to have to figure out that rotation and get them all minutes. But that's a three-headed monster that's going to cause a lot of damage in the Horizon League.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that. One of their first away games, like Columbus against the Ohio State Buckeyes, and
maybe they can catch him early, and we'll see.
in school. So, yeah, so we thank, you know, Jim Dabbelt and Coach Gensler. They came to us, put that together for us, and you know, thanks to Carlo and his talking to us at the National. And you know, next week, you know, we're hoping to have a little bit more to show you guys, and maybe another announcement for the Medina County Collectors Fair.
Very exciting stuff on the horizon. Our thanks to Haley as well on the board behind us. Appreciate that. We say it takes a village here at Greenie Sports Cards. You've got an incredible team working with you, buying and selling every day, producing events, producing content, and we'll keep it rolling. So check out the show. You got Broadview Heights coming up, Kirtland, then Medina County later this month, the 27th through the 29th. So Greenie, our thanks most of all to you. Let us do
We appreciate it. Football is here. Go Browns.